Okay, so Benjamin is a great consultant. He's IT security expert and researcher. He loves researches about darknet and dark economy. And he's going to talk about how cryptography meets cybercrime. And recently, you know about those malwares who encrypt your hard drive. That's very recent, very hot topic. So please, I would like you to welcome warmly Benjamin. Thank you.
Hey, good morning, everybody. So quickly about myself, my day job is with Akamai Technologies, where I get to research dark web, deep web, dark nets. I also do a lot of cybercrime and underground economy research, and I do CISP training. I do not hold a CISP. Also, I do incident response, both for the company and for our customers when they're under attack. And I get to be a chaos monkey, where I just go around like breaking shit all over the place and then helping them fix it. A little bit about the scope of this talk. What I am talking about is hacking and cracking that is financially motivated, like somebody is trying to either not spend money or they're trying to make money. I'm not talking about hacking in general that isn't really financially motivated. So I'm not talking about hacktivism or website defacement or anything like that. So some terms to... Oh, well, that's cute. Deep web, darknet, and dark web. A lot of times the media likes to use these interchangeably, but they are distinct and do have very different meanings. When you're talking about the deep web, you're talking about this large portion of the internet that is not indexed by search engines. When you talk about a darknet, those are specific technical frameworks that sit on top of the internet. They're overlay networks, essentially. There are some mesh networks, but we're not going to talk much about those. And the dark web, these are the HTTP or www, the web hosting portion of the darknets, and they sit on top of the darknet. So you've got the dark web on top of the darknet, on top of the deep web, on top of the surface internet. All right, so we're going to start at the very beginning, at the dawn of electronic time. I'm going to give you three stories, three scenarios here. I'm sure they'll sound familiar. The first one is about a scam involving network administration jobs, where this company who tells you they're affiliated with a big name network operator, they're going to train you. You just have to pay them up front, and they're going to train you to be a network admin on this big name network. And then once you're done, they will guarantee you a job with this company. Turns out they don't really do any of that. They kind of train you, but then when you go to the company to get the job that they've guaranteed, the company says, look, we're not affiliated with that school. That was a scam. You wasted your money. Another scam that you've probably heard of, international banking and wire fraud, where somebody does social engineering and they do identity fraud, and they say, hey, I am backpacking through this country, or I am out in the middle of nowhere in this country, and I've been robbed. I don't have any of my ID. I need you to wire me some money. And it turns out they're just stealing money from somebody else's account. This particular story was somebody in Turkey was calling banks in Paris and London and doing this scam on them. Another one, wiretaps, where somebody has actually put a tap on the wire for the network and is capturing prices and talk about narcotics in the country, in India in this case. And what they're doing is they're manipulating the data so that they control the narcotics market in that area. Can anybody guess about what year these scams happened? Any guesses? So these scams happened in the late 1800s. 1890, 1872, and 1861. These scams happened on the Telegram network. So essentially, the point I'm trying to make here is that there is nothing new under the sun. All of the scams that are happening today have happened in the past. The only thing that's changing is the tools. And these tools that are shifting is what we're going to be talking about. So we'll start with the 70s, the age of disco. In 1970, about then, we start seeing organized crime really putting their foot in the water for electronic crime. Al Gilbertson, who is arguably the creator of the blue box. Does anybody not know what a blue box is? Okay, so quick description. A blue box emits a certain tone. We'll talk about the frequency in the next slide. And what it does for the old telephone network is it allows you to make free long-distance calls. And of course, for the mafia, that's a very big deal because a huge chunk of, especially at that time, of their income was in taking bets. And they would have to make lots of long-distance calls to the bookmakers to get the information for the bets. So imagine how much money they'd be saving, especially back then, if they didn't have to pay for long-distance calls. So the creator of the blue box struck a deal with the Las Vegas faction of the mafia in the US and started mass producing these blue boxes for them. And they fit in little cigarette cases. And they even had a kill switch on them that fried the motherboard, which I thought was cute. Anybody recognize this? Yeah, the old people are like, yeah. So this is a Captain Crunch whistle that actually came in the Captain Crunch cereal. Turns out you don't need some fancy electronics to produce the tone that gave you free long-distance calls. You could just use this whistle, which, does anybody know what the hertz was for it? Yeah, 2700. Yeah, that's where the name of the magazine came from. The next year, John Draper found that whistle produced, 2600, the 2600 hertz tone that allowed you to go ahead and essentially emulate a blue box. A fun fact, there were two people, one of them being Joy Bubbles, that could produce the perfect 2600 tone with their mouth, which was amazing. But Esquire, in that same year, they published the instructions on how to make a blue box, and then the phone hacking and phone freaking just blew up that year. Just a quick note, these sorts of telephone network hacking, this happened starting back in the 50s. It had been going on for a long time, but it was very underground, and it was a very select few people, and they didn't really interact a whole lot. But in the 70s, they started to actually get together and start collectives. In 1972, we have our first case of selling drugs on the internet. 1972. Students at Stanford University in the Artificial Intelligence Lab, they used their ARPANET account to sell a small amount of marijuana to their cohorts over in MIT. So way before the Silk Road, you had people selling drugs on the internet. In 1973 saw the first two cases of people trying to steal money using electronic systems. So Equity Funding Corporation of America, there was an auditor there that was able to use the electronic accounting system that they had in place to siphon off and embezzle funds from the company. In New York's Diamond Savings Bank, a chief teller there was caught trying to embezzle over $1.5 million using the electronic system. So e-crime goes back quite a bit. Okay, now we'll talk about the first few darknets. And these weren't made to be darknets, they just became darknets by default. So when I'm talking about darknets, there are two distinctions to make here. In the 1970s, when ARPANET was around, darknet had a very different meaning than most people use it today. What a darknet meant then was any network that did not send information to ARPANET. Those networks might have received information, but because ARPANET was military-based, they had to firewall it off, essentially, from the other networks. And this was for security reasons. There was no search indexing for these at the time, and there was no overarching cohesiveness to these networks. Fun fact, a lot of these other side networks that were dark nets, essentially they were what became the building blocks of the internet as we know it today. All right, the 80s and 90s, this was a lot of fun. I'm sure a lot of you, especially the people I see a little bit of gray in their hair, will get a kick out of this. So this is when we started to see the rise of hacker collectives. Loft Heavy Industries, my boys in Boston, great guys. This is when they started up. Chaos Computer Club, I'm sure a lot of you know them. The Cult of the Dead Cow, they're also still around and kicking. Masters of Deception, they're long gone, so is the Legion of Doom and Firm, but this is when they started. The Chinese Honker Network, this is probably the largest, I would say, yeah, definitely the largest hacker collective. We're talking tens of thousands of people in China being part of this hacker collective. We also saw a huge boost in the media presentation of hacking and hackers. War games, sneakers, Hackers the movie, of course. I'm sure you all have the theme song for Hackers going through your head right now. Somebody's probably getting ready to shout, "Hack the Gibson." But this is when the media exposure really started blowing up. And of course, because there was a lot of increasing reader and journalist and general technical aptitude raising, there were a lot more people getting into the hacking scene. And then, of course, out of that, we saw a lot more government and company websites being hacked. And of course, there were government responses to this. In 1981, that's when we had the first Interpol training for investigations of cybercrime. In 1982, the US passed the terrible Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, which is still widely abused today. In 1988, anti-hacking laws in France were put in place, and that's also when the Computer Fraud Agency, or as it's known here, DST, was set up. France was well ahead of a lot of the other European countries in getting their hacking laws and their computer fraud team in place. In 1989, the Council of Europe put forth their recommendations, and these were recommendations on what your laws should be around cybercrime and how you deal with cybercrime. This is what most of the rest of Europe based their laws on. In 1990, the UK issued their Computer Misuse Act, and in 1998, the G8 set of countries, they set up a 24/7 hotline for the countries and the small rural areas and small police stations that didn't have the technical aptitude to go after these cyber criminals. They could just call up this hotline and get an expert any time of day to help walk them through the investigation. And of course, this was the age of the first crypto wars. Now we'll talk about the first sort of quasi-darknets. They were darknets in the sense that they weren't indexed by search engines, and for some of them, you definitely had to be in the know how to connect to it, have the right software, and in some cases, be a member of that network in order to gain access. We'll start with BBSs. All right. The bulletin board systems, there were specific subsets of BBSs called elite or elite BBSs, and these were focused on software piracy or wares. I'm sure some of you in your head are saying Juarez. No, it's wares. Freaking how-tos, hacking how-tos. They didn't suffer noobs for the most part. They also started dipping their toes into credit card fraud, identity fraud, scams, and cracking in general. For most of these, it was a membership-based model to try and keep out the feds. This is where the game Spot the Feds started. Also, out of this cracking scene came a bunch of really cool groups like Razor 1911, they're still around. But also out of this cracking scene came the demo scene. Does anybody recognize any of these names? These are pretty famous in the demo scene. These are French groups, Equinox, Oxygen, and Popsy Team. These are really, really talented folks who get together and use very low tech to make some very cool music and visuals. And of course, we have the government backlash. In the 1990 to 1992, the Great Hacker Crackdown happened. One of the biggest operations here was Operation Sun Devil, and this was the Secret Service, the FBI, and then a number of other smaller law enforcement agencies. They got together to target and take down a whole bunch of these elite bulletin board systems. They also targeted FRAC, the e-zine, which was the precursor to 2600. FRAC is actually still around. You should go check it out. They're still producing some pretty cool content. But for some reason, they were targeted by the FBI, and this had a real chilling effect. A lot of elite BBSs started shutting down of their own accord because they didn't want to get their door kicked in by the feds. In 1994 to 1995, we had a lot of ISPs really increasing the speed that they gave to consumers. They also started offering where you didn't have to have just one line to connect to different services. So this started the rise of image boards, subboards, hubs, and chat services, which really killed the bulletin board system within those years. And then, of course, we have Usenet, which is still around, still usable. Most people just use it for piracy these days. But back in the day, it was really a sort of chat system where you used messages and strings of messages to communicate with each other. It's also where we saw the birth of mass spamming. Also sporgery, which is forged spam. You're pretending to be somebody else that is sending these spam messages. We started to see large-scale botnets and bot wars for the first time here. And what they would do is you would have the spam bots that would try and automatically spam people, and then you had the admins of the Usenet groups that would build their own cancel bots to automatically find those spam bots and shut them down. And then, of course, there was evolution, and these spam bots turned into forged cancels, where somebody would go in and automatically cancel all of the posts in a news group to try and piss off the admin. And then the admin would make bots that would alias out those forged cancels. So it was this constant back and forth and arms race between the spammers and the admins. At about 1994, we saw a huge decline in Usenet use, and this was due to three main issues. One was AOL being introduced, so allowing a lot of people to gain access to these Usenets, which produced a huge influx of people who didn't know how to use it and were just messing around and didn't follow the etiquette, and it was just noob city all over the place. This was deemed the Endless September. It started in about September, but just kept going and going and going. Also, there was increased disk and bandwidth usage with all of these new people. So ISPs started not wanting to host Usenet because it was taking up all their bandwidth. At the same time, we had the New York Attorneys General really start cracking down on Usenet groups. He said it was in the name of trying to get rid of child porn. This wasn't the only outlet for child porn, but this is what he really chose to focus on. And so a lot of ISPs of their own accord just shut down their Usenet service so they didn't have to deal with the legal aspect of the Attorneys General. So this was a really cool hacking tool. Hip Crime's news agent was used to gain admin rights in a Usenet group, even if you weren't an admin. It would allow you to auto-repost. It would allow you to cancel other people's postings. It would allow you to even edit the content of other people's postings. So, of course, for spammers, this is like a golden tool and was well used. IRC, yeah. Does anybody remember having the pop-up for MIRC and it's got the guy's face and then you click on his nose and it makes that little noise? Yeah. All right, so IRC was just chock full of drama and hacking, and it's got a long storied past. I can do a whole talk on just the history of IRC. But there were tons of forks, forced net splits, nickname collisions, things like that that allow you to overtake people's nicknames and other channels. There was lots of pirated software, lots of pirated music. This is where we started really seeing pirated movies. Also, scanned books, a lot of PDFs, a lot of porn, of course, malware. You can get tons of malware on IRC, and there's a lot of IRC bots. This is where selling and buying drugs on the internet really blew up. You didn't see much of it on the BBSs and Usenet, but on IRC there was lots of drug and money swapping. Also, this is where the game Spot the Fed really blew up. Also, Mute the Noob, and what me and a bunch of other people used to do in these hacking channels was play a game where we would seed our conversations with keywords. So we knew that the NSA was listening in, right, or various law enforcement groups. So we would be typing and be like, so Sunday I was at the farmer's market, bombed the airport, and then I went and bought some Swiss char terrorist attack. And then, you know, we would just start putting all that stuff in there, trying to play with them, and it was fun. It was dumb, but it was fun. I'm sure you guys recognize some of these. I'm sure you guys got viruses from some of these, especially those bottom two. But this is the time of the peer-to-peer network was when we saw an explosion of pirated software being swapped. And this was a quasi-darknet because, of course, the contents of these things, because it was peer-to-peer, and nobody really built a good search engine for that at the time, it was dark. You couldn't go to Google, or I guess at this time it wouldn't be Google, it would be Alta Vista or Dogpile. Or Jeeves, Ask Jeeves, Jesus. And of course, no talk about quasi-dark nets is complete without the sneaker net. This is still in use in many countries where you can go to the electronics district and somebody's just got a table full of USB keys or CDs. In China, like there's a guy that will go around to each corner and have a blanket that he's rolled up that have a bunch of CDs taped to it. So when the cops come, he just rolls it up and runs away, goes to the next corner, and then reopens the blanket with all the pirated movies and software. All right, so let's talk about some digital criminal web bazaars that we saw popping up in the 90s to the 2000s. In about 2000, it really was 1998, but it didn't gain a lot of users until about 2000. But the counterfeit library started out as a diploma mill. You can go to them and say, hey, I want a diploma that says I got this degree from this university, and they would make it for you, and then you could hang that on your wall or show it to whoever you were trying to get a job from. They also had a lot of resources for how to commit ID fraud. In the next year, Carter Planet really took off. They had a major focus on credit card fraud. They did identity theft as well, but credit card fraud was their main focus. And it was a huge, mostly Russian community at the time. And then out of the counterfeit library came Shadow Crew. And here it was inventive in that they started the first verified vendor service, where you would have a lot of feedback and say, okay, this vendor is a scammer, or a ripper, this vendor is legit, and I bought stuff from them, and it's really good quality. So then that vendor would, of course, get more people buying from them because they have a name in the market now. And this focused mostly on stolen data, database breaches, credit card numbers, ID fraud, and tutorials for how to do these things. And of course, we have the law enforcement backlash. From 2003 to 2005, we saw Operation Firewall and Operation Anglerfish. These were huge operations. They were across the globe. It was the FBI, Secret Service, Interpol, and a lot of other countries' law enforcement getting together to shut down these forums. In 04 to 06, Iceman, or Max Butler, some of you probably know who this is. He's the guy who went to jail for for credit card fraud ostensibly, but that's what they got him for. But he went to jail mostly because he forcibly patched everybody's bind that had an issue with it. So he just like went in and got into a system and then patched their bind for them and then left, which I thought was clever. But what he did is he hacked all of these smaller forums that came out of the global law enforcement crackdown, and he would dump their databases into his database and redirect the websites so they had to log into his forum. And here he created Carter's Market, which was the largest at the time for fraud, credit card theft, all of these sorts of things. Nowadays, none of these forums stay open for longer than a year. It's like whack-a-mole. So it makes research here very difficult because you can't build an identity within one of these groups. You have to constantly hop from forum to forum. And of course, with these digital markets came digital currencies. The top ones that started out were backed by gold, or at least they said they were backed by gold. I don't know that they actually held gold in reserve. But the three largest were eGold, Pecunix, and iGolder. They're nowadays pretty much defunct. Pecunix has moved into a different market, but the other two are shut down. Between 2006 and 2013, the largest e-currency for cybercrime, without a doubt, was Liberty Reserve. This was deemed the black market bank. Of course, it was run out of Eastern Europe, and it was very, very popular for criminal forums. And it was also indicted for large-scale money laundering. I'm really surprised it lasted as long as it did. And of course, from there, we can move into cryptocurrencies. Now we're getting into encryption. So there are a couple cryptocurrencies to choose from. One of my favorites being Kanye, or the Kanye coin, which I think is hilarious because he was very pissed off that somebody did this. I'm like, why? His face is on a coin. Kanye loves Kanye. Wouldn't he love it? But I guess he doesn't like fish sticks. So the biggest one, Bitcoin, of course, released in 2009. No matter what Newsweek tries to tell you, they don't actually know who released it. It's definitely the largest by market value. I think today we're sitting at, what, 2,600 about? 2,630, something like that. It is the primary darknet market currency. It has lots of other uses, but it's definitely the largest currency for darknets, for darknet markets, rather. It has an open ledger, which means full transaction visibility. So anybody who tells you Bitcoin is anonymous, punch them in the throat. It is not anonymous. Litecoin was based off of Bitcoin. It's an actual fork of the code, so it has all the same privacy issues with it. It is not anonymous either, but it is the fourth largest by market value, and some underground markets do take Litecoin as well as Bitcoin. Ethereum is really, really cool. So there is an Ethereum coin, but there's also the Ethereum network, which is a decentralized Turing-complete virtual machine for building dispersed apps that are resistant to takedown, resistant to hacks. It's a very, very cool system. Everybody should definitely go check out Ethereum, which I think Ethereum has increased in price by like 300 in the past month. So I'm sorry if you missed that bandwagon. Monero. This is another one that a lot of darknet markets are starting to take for trade. And it was released in 2014. It's the sixth largest, but it is the fastest growing cryptocurrency for sure. It is built with privacy in mind. So a lot of darknet markets are going to start taking it on because it hides information or metadata about transactions. And of course, all of these have real uses, but also criminal uses. Ransomware, of course, you see a lot of ransomware that uses Bitcoin or Monero or some other alt currency. There's a lot of malware out there for mining crypto coins. Fun side note, the Mirai botnet, the Internet of Things botnet that took over all of these like DVRs and webcams and things that have no processing power. Somebody added a cryptocurrency mining function to it. Why? I guess because they could. They couldn't have, if they were running all of the botnet flat out mining, they would only be making 0.025 cents a day. So I have no idea why they added that on there. But these are also used for money laundering, also for buying and trading shady goods and services. Now we're getting in finally into the modern darknets. So the first ones that were created didn't have a web component. They were strictly chat, file sharing, things like that. The three largest, arguably, are OneSwarm, Tribbler, and RetroShare. These are all still active. And then, of course, we get the ones that support websites. And yes, there's more than just one darknet, and it's not just Tor. We'll start with Tor because it's the largest in use. It was initially, okay, this is where the conspiracy theorists like really get out of hand and need to put on their tinfoil hats. It was initially developed by the US Naval Research Lab and DARPA between 94 to 1997, but it was released publicly and then taken on by a third party. It uses multi-layered encryption aiming for anonymous communications. It's definitely the largest darknet and the largest platform for darknet markets. Freenet was released in 2000. Freenet is mostly focused on anti-censorship. So it's censorship resistant, and it really focuses on free speech. So the way it's distributed is so that if one node is taken down, it won't take down the website of whoever is trying to promote their free speech. It uses a key-based routing protocol, which has some downsides. It's slow, it's resource intensive, but it does provide some security for sure. The second largest darknet, I would say, is probably I2P, the Invisible Internet Project. It was released in 2003, and it uses garlic routing, which is an extension of Tor routing, the onion routing. It not only focuses on doing web, but it encompasses all the protocols so that you can anonymously use all of the network protocols, and ones that you can create yourself if you integrate it. Nuit, of course, by the Nuit project. This was released in 2001. It's not by default a darknet, but if you use the friend-to-friend network topography for it, it becomes a darknet. It gained a lot of popularity after the Edward Snowden prison leaks. And then, of course, the smallest one, which is in version 2.0 in development right now, is Netsukuku. You'd think by that name it was developed by some Japanese guy or in Japan or some Japanese girl, but no, it's some Italian dude that just wanted a Japanese name for it. But some really cool features that I think if you're interested in network protocols, you should go check out. He did his own custom routing protocol, the QSpin, and also his own distributed DNS system, ANDNA. And they're both really cool. The white papers for those are great. It's in extreme alpha, and there's been no real large-scale testing for it. So I wouldn't trust it right away. ZeroNet, this one's sort of in the middle. It aims for takedown immunity like Freenet, and it's based on both the BitTorrent network topography and Bitcoin cryptography for its security and anonymity, which should tell you something because it's not anonymous. It's pseudonymous. I actually said that right. All right. And the one you should really be keeping an eye on, this is the one that could overtake Tor, I could definitely see it happening, is Riffle. It's a new project out of MIT Labs. It was introduced just last year. It claims to be 10 times faster than Tor and more secure than Tor. If you read the white paper, you can see why they say what they're claiming, but I won't believe it until they do large-scale testing, because I don't know how scalable this framework is. It's an extreme alpha, but the guys behind it and the tech behind it are very solid, and I would expect to see great things out of this darknet in the future. All right, so the market pioneers. The first market didn't actually start out as a darknet market. It started out as Atom Flowers, which was a ClearNet site, and it did most of its transactions using Hushmail, which is an encrypted service that said, oh, we're super secret private, we'll keep all your stuff private, but it turns out they were working with the feds the whole time. So that's how they eventually got busted. But the farmers market was Atom Flowers that moved from the ClearNet to Tor so that they could gain that encryption and anonymity. They were the first true darknet market with retail-like customer service. They accepted cash, they accepted Western Union, Pecunix, iGolder, and for some god-awful reason, they accepted PayPal, which is just the worst idea ever. They had about 3,000 users at their peak in over 55 countries, and it focused exclusively on drugs. That's the only thing you can buy and sell on there were drugs. And of course, the law enforcement just completely destroyed them in Operation Atom Bomb in 2012. This was the DEA plus law enforcement in Netherlands, Colombia, and Scotland. So the Tor encryption wasn't broken. There wasn't anything wrong with that. It was that they were using PayPal, which was dumb, and that they were using Hushmail, which was a honeypot. So, of course, law enforcement was able to get all of their messages and trace all the money through PayPal. And they also worked with the USPS to start opening packages that were involved in the network, and then confirming that they were drugs, and then doing controlled deliveries, and then slapping cuffs on whoever signed for the package. Atlantis popped up in 2013. This was very inventive in that it was the first to support Litecoin as well as Bitcoin, and it was the first to allow more than drugs. You can see this is a picture of some of their offerings. They had Microsoft product keys, they had tutorials, they had stolen credit card numbers, and then of course a bunch of drugs. They were the first to produce a marketing video, which is hilarious, and I'll show you in a minute. And it was possibly the first exit scam, which is where they wait for a lot of people to put money into the market and then close the market down and then run away with the cryptocurrencies. This happens a lot. All right, so here's their Web 2.0 startup marketing video. Let's see if we can get it to play. Unfortunately, the sound's not working. It would have been awesome if they could have gotten this on TV channels. But it's mostly ads through other websites. Yeah. So that's hilarious. I mean, that looks like a legitimate startup business, doesn't it? All right, now, of course, we have to talk about the 800-pound gorilla, Silk Road. This was the first modern darknet market that had escrow services. It was also the first to have extensive vendor reputation, where once you bought something, you had to rate the vendor on the quality of their product, how it was shipped, how fast the transaction was, things like that. It was shut down in 2013 by law enforcement. The suspected owner, I say suspected because if any of you have seen The Princess Bride, you know that the title Dread Pirate Roberts doesn't necessarily mean one person. But he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. He actually just recently lost his appeal on that. Out of that, the admins that weren't caught started up Silk Road 2.0, but then that was shut down by law enforcement in 2014. There's still ongoing investigations for Silk Road, but not necessarily into Silk Road itself, but into a bunch of the officers that were targeting Silk Road that then stole Bitcoin because they didn't realize Bitcoin is not anonymous. So of course they got caught. All right, the current state of the darknet markets. We're definitely in a black market bubble for darknet markets. As you can see, law enforcement taking down Silk Road really made a huge difference. This is just a small sample of all the darknet markets that are out there. Quick update, Outlaw Market, as of last month, is sort of defunct. We don't know what happened. One of the head admins just disappeared. We think it might be an exit scam, but it wouldn't really make sense because they're the oldest and they would lose their claim to being the oldest darknet market. Real Deal Market, that's where you saw for sale the Yahoo hack, Ashley Madison breach. There's just a bunch of hacks that the database ended up for sale on the Real Deal before it went public. The largest on here is arguably Alpha Bay Market, followed by Hansa and Dream Market. And of course, we have at least 12 markets that have done an exit scam where they just ran away with everybody's Bitcoin, or Bitcoin and Monero now. A bunch of them have been taken down by law enforcement. A whole bunch of other ones have been hacked, including the French darknet. Sorry, guys. Also, there's a bunch, we don't know what happened. There's no news out of Infinity, Dark Rabbit, THC Market, or Haven. Agora, they made an announcement that they believed in that Tor privacy was compromised, so they shut down their market until until it gets patched. The kind of stuff you can get are, of course, drugs, precursors, lab equipment, stolen data, pirated software, counterfeit items, crime tutorials, melee weapons, and firearms. Don't buy firearms off the darknet, please, because 9 times out of 10, it's going to be law enforcement. You can also get Bitcoin wallets from the darknet. I would totally trust these. You can get somebody to hack your grading system at your school for you. You can get somebody to get a Wi-Fi hacker tool, which is free, but if you want to buy it on the darknet, you can. You can get a VPN from the darknet markets. I would not trust that at all. Stuff that you can find on Amazon for cheaper. Also books. You can buy The Secret in PDF format, or you can buy the Anarchist Cookbook, which is free. All right, let's look at the future real quick. Dark Wallet, keep your eye on Dark Wallet. It's very cool. It's a new Bitcoin wallet. It implements stealth transactions, which is a really cool Diffie-Hellman implementation. It uses multi-signature cooperative wallets, so multiple people can share a wallet. It also has built-in escrow capabilities for markets, and it uses obfuscation through coin join mixing, which mashes together transactions to make transaction frequency analysis a lot more difficult. It is in extreme alpha, so I wouldn't trust it just yet. Dash, formerly Darkcoin, cryptocurrency to keep your eye on. Running out of time, so I'm going to have to... Shadowcoin and Umbra have now moved into Particle, which is a really cool system. It's open source, decentralized privacy platform. It will be the future of darknet markets, for sure. This and Umbra. And they've already raised $750,000 in their development round. And it looks kind of like Etsy, right? But this is what they want to do for the future of darknet markets, is have your messaging, your wallet, everything in one encrypted source. Zcash and Komodo are doing the same thing. For Zcash, this is the cryptocurrency that I would suggest everybody invest in next and that everybody keep their eye on. It's got Zuko Wilcox O'Hearn behind it, and it's very, very privacy oriented. All right, so the US, Rule 41. So this is a terrible, terrible law. And the US have just recently put a change into it that allow for global hacking warrants, where they can just hack computers all over the globe, whether or not the people themselves behind the computer are guilty of anything. If they suspect that the computer is part of a botnet, they can hack that computer. It also allows for them to go from judge to judge to find one that will just give them the warrant. The UK has something very similar they just passed that grants them global hacking powers. So I ask now, are we in Crypto Wars 2.0? I would say yes. So looking at what the NSA has done with them putting in encryption backdoors, what the UK has done with their laws, what a lot of other European countries have done with their surveillance laws, what will all of this mean for the future of the internet, for darknets, for privacy, personal privacy, for security, and then for the criminals, but also for everyday regular citizens? All right.
Thank you very much. It's really hot topic. It's okay. It's because take it later. We have time for only 2 questions, very fast. So I will ask both the person who asked and Benjamin to answer shortly. Est-ce qu'il y a des questions?
Also, if you want to ask later, there's my email address and my Twitter.
I would say, can we send you malwares?
Oh, yes, I reverse engineer malware, so send me malware, please.